Hash House and Circle Up.
Welcome to On, the Hash House Harrier podcast for interviews, history, and stories. I'm your host, Ra.
Today we're back in Australia, down in Hobart with a longtime hasher. Welcome today on the podcast, Grizz. Hi, Grizz.
Hi, Ra. Welcome to Virtual Tasmania.
Let's introduce you with your hashing origin story. When, where, and how did you get to your first hash?
In 78, I was playing rugby with Burnie, which is on the northwest coast of Tasmania. That was my first year playing rugby. We're doing some pre-season training, and there was a group of players standing around talking about an activity on a Tuesday night. What are you talking about? And they said, this is a new hash group. And they explained what it was, and I thought, okay, well, that sounds like a bit of fun. I wasn't much of a runner. In fact, being a prop forward, I tried to shy away from running altogether. When we were doing laps of the oval, I'd duck off into the dark corners and skip a few laps. So the running part didn't really seem to work for me, but went along anyway, and I was hooked from that moment. I was there plodding along at my pace, and all the FTs and checks, and they were running back towards me, and I'm thinking, this is how it should always be.
Yeah. How old were you when you first started playing rugby?
I was a late starter, so I was 17 when I started, so 18 when I had my first hash trail.
Apart from somebody being brought there by their parents, you're one of the youngest starters in the hashing world. What was the shape of the hash then in terms of size and tradition? What was that first hash like that hooked you?
I think we'll go to the founder of the Burnie hash, so Burnie, northwest Tasmania, a chap by the name of Mike Boss Walker, who hashed with Westcombe Park in the UK. He brought the traditions of Westcombe Park to that hash. We had the funny hats, and we had the plastic potty as a hashet, and all of mismanagement, the same sort of format. And it was just the humour. Hash and rugby have a fairly close alignment in that social aspect. So it wasn't a huge leap from rugby to hash. It's still the same sort of sense of humour, and songs were sort of part of both of those realms.
And what was the age range for you coming in? Were some of your rugby mates the same age as you, and what was the hash group?
It's something of the irony is that the people who started the Burnie hash were old. Now, when I say old, they were 30s, and they were towards the end of their rugby playing days. But I always looked at them as quite senior people. And of course, 34 these days would be well below average for many hash clubs.
So you're hooked right away. And how long did it take you to set a trail or get more involved?
This was run number 3 for the Burnie club. The club was still in its very early formative years, or formative days. We were only running monthly originally, then it was fortnightly, then went to weekly. But I was one of 3 people to be the first to get 50 runs with Burnie. I was there weekly. I probably set a trail within the first 10 runs. And they were pretty much live hair runs. That's changed a lot for most clubs around this area anyway. Very few live hairs.
Yeah, so you weren't a sprinter. How'd that work setting live hairs with you? Were you on your own? Do you have co-hair, and how much lead you get?
Co-hair and cheating are the two. So I would pre-lay some of the trail, and 20 minutes. That was the given time. And as long as I could get out of viewing distance within that 20 minutes, then I was pretty safe.
Yeah. There people that have hashed in one place or just a few places with standard traditions. There may be people that only have been on live trails or never been while you were out with your head start. What'd you do as a pack?
Look, I got a bit wiser later on. I would make them drink port before the run, before I set off, because I figured that might slow them down somewhat. It was more a case of organising myself so that I knew where the exit point was, or if I had an escape vehicle, if it was within a vehicular tracks or something. So yeah, it wasn't very long after that we went to dead hares, because most people were dead herring at that stage.
Yeah. So did it affect your rugby? Did you get in better shape? Did the running? At first it was just monthly.
Look, round is a shape. I stayed round, and I was a prop forward, so
Yeah.
I had a particular role to play, and I didn't really enjoy the running, but hashing didn't require sort of marathon running. It required cunning running, and being able to hear the horn or to hear the pack, and being able to work out any shortcuts sort of kept me in the game.
What kind of place is it? What was the terrain?
Burnie, we had lots of forestry areas, a lot of pine plantations, a lot of natural forests. We had quite a bit of farmland that we could have access to. They were the best trails. It's not so easy these days. It tends to be a lot more street park running in summer.
How long were you living there?
I was there until 2007, 2008. That's when I moved to Hobart. I had 750 runs with Burnie in that time. The Burnie Club itself folded for quite a few years. It just ran out of steam, ran out of people to join in. So we folded. We had a couple of attempts to bring it back, and it was only into Hash in 2000 where there was that new interest that we came back, and the Burnie chapter's been running ever since. Strongly.
You got Grizzly on your Hobart jacket there. Did they have hash gear at the start? How long did it take Burnie to get that stuff?
Our first hash T-shirt was within the first 50 runs. It was a pretty generic T-shirt. I designed the T-shirt for the 50th run, so that was our first commemorative piece of travel. We also had patches that were screen printed in those days, and we'd have them for any sort of special run that we had, or an AGPU.
So you got involved with that, designing the shirt and first to 50 runs. So you're a regular. How was it your personality to be a leadership? How'd you get into mismanagement?
Yeah, look, others will say I'm a control freak. I just think I like to contribute. I have a set of skills that I like to push forward. In some ways, it's a burden because people will tend to hang back and expect me to do something, which generally I'm happy to do.
What did you find out about other hashes and do any travel to other clubs?
In those early days, there were Tasmanian intra hashes, so that the Tasmanian clubs would gather into one spot on an annual basis. So we knew of other clubs and people, of course, visiting. We had a chap by the name of Clive Albury. He had the handle, the Beast of Barhow, but he also was known as the Gurkha locally. He was a very sort of slight man. He had these interesting shorts, which were like Bermuda shorts, which at the time in those early 80s was all the shorts were just hanging below the crotch. So him in these long shorts and long socks was a bit of a sight. He travelled a lot and he was trying to get us interested in interhatch in those early days. But of course, travel in those early days was very expensive beyond our means. It was really 2000 that sort of opened our eyes just to how wild and wacky the hash world was. Immediately after 2000, we booked to go to Goa.
What do you remember about the run up to 2000, the bid, the first time it was bid and then winning the bid?
We were quite remote. It's 4 hours travel between Hobart and Burnie. A lot of visitations. We volunteered. Some of us who did go, we were on like the beer stalls, helping out. But the actual committee, we had some of our numbers who were part of the committee, either early committee or certainly in the bid committees when it wasn't successful a couple of times. So 98 was when the bid was won, and it all got very interesting after that.
What role were you then in Burnie? That was 20 years into your hashing.
2000, I was 40. I had two teenage kids, or early teenage kids. My wife, who was also a hasher, she actually had to babysit the two kids whilst I went down to Hobart, but she couldn't go to the trails or the functions. And she never stops reminding me of it.
What's her hash name?
Lone Arranger.
For Hobart, what do you remember about that event? Certainly up to that point, instantly afterwards, a lot of interhashers said, "Oh, that's the best thing." It was unique in a lot of ways for us that had been to a handful of interhashes by then. What do you remember about it?
The Red Dress Run was obviously the first point. Just to see that the sheer number of people was astounding, and running through one of the main streets of Hobart and having school kids out cheering us on, not really knowing what they were cheering on, but doing it regardless. And then just those evening functions, just the vibe of the place. Being on the bar was just the greatest spot because people were coming up to you and talking, because you never get to circulate as much if you were just a participant. But here, they were quite willing to come up and talk.
Hobart winning it, there's a couple less fun things to talk about. A couple things went wrong. Certainly, what was the background to Hobart getting huge government support for their bid? Of course, there was a tragic incident there. How did that affect you in Hobart that you remember?
There was a bus crash just a week or so prior to the event, or a couple of weeks prior to the event. And that bus was actually on its way to the northwest coast to promote the train trip, which was going from Devonport down to Hobart, the largest passenger train that Tasmania had seen. And it was the bus trip after that promotional tour where it left the road and rolled a couple of times. So again, we weren't part of the committee, so we didn't know about things until we actually got there. And then some of the people who we did know, to see Easy Rider, who was the Interhash chairman with his scalp and truly taped up. So there were people who weren't there who had put in a lot of work prior to Interhash, which was a source of sadness for them anyway.
But the event that maybe changed Hobart for a while, Tasmania for a while, the shooting.
Yeah, look, it's almost unimaginable. You can't help but be touched by it. We were still living in Burnie at that stage, but we certainly knew of the area. And some of our hashers now, they were, at least on a peripheral, they were involved in the aftermath of that. Even like we had an Oktoberfest for one of the Hobart clubs down at Port Arthur, and we went through the Port Arthur precinct. And then just to come across the memorial, just you always got to stop and think, and it's almost unimaginable for us.
Yeah, it was a terrible thing. Certainly, it must have impacted the tourism, and that helped get lots of support for the Interhash being one of the events that brought people back to Hobart. I remember thinking about it and saying, it's no big deal. It was a one-time event, but it has this horrible effect on everybody and on the economy and tourism and everything else. I remember from the outside thinking, what's the big deal? It's not something that we're to be afraid of going forward, but it's just a significant event in history. Yeah.
I think on quite a few of our Interhash trips, there's been something prior to the trip that has prior to Goa, there were tensions between India and Pakistan. I think it might have been Borobudur. They had a volcano eruption not long beforehand. You don't generally let these things. One of our long-time Hobart hashers, and he was the bid chairman for 2000, Mad Dog. He'd been prior to Trinidad or the Goa replacement, he'd been to all except one, and that's where there was travel advice from the government to say don't travel to Indonesia. So you're always against something happening somewhere.
Yeah, The opening for Tasmania Interhash blew me away. It was like the film. It was a professional grade film that was just, what is happening here?
Yeah, I think, and look, I feel the same way about Borobudur. The way they are able to put on such a huge show in such an important area. And this all comes down to money. I mean, Hash on a budget has a budget feel. In Hash where you've got the funds behind, you're able to do things with it.
With Cardiff Interhash, of course, we got Millennium Stadium, but the facility for Hobart Interhash was pretty spectacular too. It was a great city, being on the water. The facility was great. What was the bar set up there?
There were just like little canteen areas that were around the periphery, and there was also bands outside the venue. So we were in one of the inside ones. We had a bit of a problem on the first night. There was some teething issues with the beer that generally people got well and truly watered anyway.
We'll talk more about your other stories you have personally about hashing, but the other one thing that maybe never has been anything like it was the after circle parties of the Tasmania Interhash. The way I remember, it was community involvement. There was a local band. The community put on the Barbie. I don't know how the organization went, but it was perfect. It was exactly Australian. It was exactly Tasmanian, and it was just the best, safest, stress-free event as an attender.
Yeah, and look, and the weather was great.
Oh yeah.
Mismanagement can't claim all the credit because those things are outside of your control, but they did a fantastic job. That these events will work if you've got, you know, everything organised down to the T. And of course, the bus crash is one of those things where even though it took out quite a few people, the event was still able to go ahead because they were that well organised.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing when I heard about that and just said, who's putting this event on? You just lost key people. You were in the serving beer, and you've got what you called your personality of organizing and contributing.
Control freak, yeah.
It was. Yeah. So how did that affect you in things in hashing and then intra-hashing? What was your attitude about it after that?
I think because I was probably more involved with the Aussie Nash Hash in 2011, so Hobart hosted that. And we had 1,100 people to that particular event. Even though it was a different committee, we approached it with pretty much the same attitude of making sure that, you know, we had every eventuality covered. And again, the venue was great. We're a bit closer to the city this time, which was a bonus. The weather again was fantastic, which you can't always say for Tasmania. Look, my interest in Interhash was, you know, absolutely ramped up to 11 because I didn't get to Cardiff, but I've been to all prior to the most recent. When New Zealand, I was there, but the Goa one I didn't make.
When did you move to Hobart?
2007.
And what was the impetus? Why'd you move to Hobart?
We had a change in my role, my paying job. But they had redundancies, which I took, and really the only opportunities for me at my sort of level were in Hobart. We'd been hashing, we had a lot more trips down to Hobart, and we had much more of a connection to the Hobart hashes at that time. So we knew the people down here. There was a bit more to it down here. So we decided we'll pack up and move down here.
Was that a clean cut? Did you leave behind everything there, home, sell everything, and
oh yes,
one way move? Yeah,
one way move. No, you make decisions. It was a life decision rather than a hash decision, of course. But certainly going to an area knowing that you've got people that you can at least call upon if you need to, and able to put down roots quite quickly.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing about hashing then. you're moving across the province basically, and because of being part of hashing, we'll just have instant friends, instant activities. What through that time, through 2000, at what point did rugby change for you?
Rugby changed for me in 1988 when I tore my ACL. That was the end of my playing days. I say that because I played the social game in New Zealand and then came off much worse than I ever did.
Yeah, that was worth it, wasn't it?
I found that my 60-year-old body doesn't bounce off the ground quite as quickly.
Over your right shoulder, you got a couple family members maybe on the wall back there.
Oh, they're fur babies. Yeah, they're deceased dogs.
Yeah, we're able to go on the hash in Burnie or anything. What was that like?
Oh,
yeah. Kids and animals.
Were welcomed. My daughter, Lauren, her hash name is Lala, because you'd put her fingers over her ears and go la whenever the songs were being sung. She was helping me set trails at 8 years old. So she was a hash horror. And she was on and off. She's been to a couple of inter hashes. So kids were fine. In fact, she had mismanagement positions as a 13-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
She was the hash cash.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That might have changed her attitudes about money, getting a little bit more cash in her hand. How that affected her allowance attitude.
I know it's a joke that hash cashers get to buy a new car each year, but no, her role was more to harass people for their weekly fees.
Oh, yeah. Nobody's going to say no to a young, harassing little hasher horror, yeah.
Mm. And dogs, I took my dog on quite a few. Lost him a couple of times. He found the pack before I found him, so he had good sense of direction anyway.
What about trails? You're in the woods in Burnie there at the beginning anyhow, and you were pretty healthy for rugby shape. Did you get any hash injuries that interfered with rugby, or how that happened along the way? Yeah,
injuries, because the hashing came after the rugby game, so I was quite often hashing injured anyway because but probably my worst was crossing over a 3-strand barbed wire fence on a farm, and I'd put my foot on a stay on the other side and it slipped down and I dragged my whole leg over the top of the barbed wire fence, and it was quite impressive by the time I got back to the on.
Did you have events with white powder there ever? That's something that's common around the whole world, but maybe the culture is different there.
Not in Burnie, and that's a more recent thing because the anthrax is post 2011. But even now, quite often we'll see on the local community Facebook groups, they'll be saying, "What is this white powder outside my house? Should I be concerned?" And there's enough hashes involved to say, "Oh well, no, that's." Don't be alarmed.
In that part of the world, a lot of people have passed around the tradition of a hash marking can on a stick. Is that something that was down there for you?
Oh, absolutely. That was an early thing. I think we brought it back from New Zealand. One of our members had been in New Zealand and they were using it there. Prior to that, we were throwing handfuls down, which was messy and somewhat wasteful. But yeah, we've used what we call the dribble dropper pretty much every week.
Yeah, I saw it in, I think, Rotorua, and I said this is the best thing I've ever seen for setting marks, and I tried to use it in Cairo, and Cairo was a desert, and flour wasn't such a good idea anyhow. We ended up moving to red lentils at one point, which would always just get eaten up. We had when I got there in 89 in Cairo, we used toilet paper and we would wrap it around, would carry rocks with us if we were in sand, otherwise there were rocks on. We'd wrap it around rocks and leave a tail out, and they would all just disintegrate or get eaten by goats. And talk about waste and talk about doing 1,000 deep knee bends while you're setting trail.
Because we're running a lot of farms in the early days, we actually used a lot of shredded paper.
Oh, yeah.
We had a local printer that we'd get the offcuts from them and we'd bag them up, and that's how you went across paddocks with where you couldn't see flower unless you're right on top of it.
You're running across private property too, and obviously if you cross a barbed wire fence, they're not hoping you're coming through. Yeah.
It's with permission. Enough people knew other landowners, and you try and go through gates. Crossing fences is just not an easy thing to do, and the possibility of wrecking the fence is high. So you try and go for gates.
I want to ask you about individual interhash memories and things, because you've been to so many. But when you landed in Hobart, how did you get involved as taking some control there?
As I said, they knew me, they knew us, and it did take a while. I tried to impose the Burnie way of life on them, and they weren't having a bar of it. So I had to pull my head in there. But yeah, look, it probably took me 5 years of being in the background, but yeah, these days I've had most jobs.
What was your role in 2011 with the Nash Hash? 1,100 people. There's a couple levels. There's a local club, whatever size you are. Then there's more than 100. And then once you get 500, it's a whole different kind of issue and issues. And 1,000 is one of the large events. Aussie Nash Hash is one of the big mega events that happens regularly.
Yeah, it is a mini interhash in most aspects. So I was vice chair and Lone Ranger was the chair. I had everything from registrations to the program, doing all the graphic designing for the items, and as a secretary and whatever there was. I didn't really take account of what we're doing.
You started with the first Burnie shirt design. Is that something you do for a living, or that's just a hobby and are you good at it?
Yeah, look, no, it's not my job. I'm a bean counter. I'm a sort of finance numbers man, but it's just an interest. I've done all of our away shirts for Interhashes. I did a lot of the design work for Interhash 2024. It was like putting my mind to it and coming up with the results.
What were the distinct memories of 2011 event then?
I think I was so busy that it was probably more after the event. Like there was a huge come down after everything had finished because you'd spend so much time gearing up for it. And we were there on the Sunday mopping up the venue, and just that realization that it was all done and dusted, and yeah, it was quite taxing, that come down.
Anything that shook you? Any surprises happened that you remembered, say, uh-oh, and took a more effort or something? How unplanned were the surprises?
The only issue I had was when we cleaned up, I'd lost a thumbnail drive with a lot of information. That was panic stations. I never did find it again. Somebody else cleaned it up, but yeah, we again, because we'd organised things down to an individual line level, people knew their jobs. We had a lot of volunteers. The main hash community really got behind the event. It brought a lot of new hashes in. It was really the expansion era of Tasmanian hash in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so that was 33 years from the start of your hashing. What did the demographics look like then?
Still around my age or older. So I was still not the youngest, but still quite early on. It's still that way to a degree. Like it's the older people are still there. The people who were hashing in 2000, by and large, if they're still able to, are still hashing now. There's that longevity with hash.
Yeah.
And the trick is to get new blood in. And some of the clubs have done a lot of that in recent years. It's still looking rather strong.
Let's talk about one logistic point. How do you handle the beer when you're calculating and negotiating to get enough beer served to 1,100 people? How'd that?
It helps that we had somebody very experienced in that area, a chap by the name of Flasher from Devonport. He was our beverage coordinator. We overcated. That's what you do. You overcater. You might give an educated guess what people might drink. A lot of people just go have their one beer and go. Others will stay on, but by and large, we had a lot left over at the end. A lot we could take back. Some of it we couldn't.
Given what you went through and how that organized and the different approaches used by interhashes, what do you think is the best deal, or does it matter? Kegs, cans, returnable thing. What works, and what have you seen good, well done at interhashes, and things that, they obviously didn't think about this the same way?
I think the main change is that beer isn't the most favoured drink now. Now, it used to be beer or nothing. These days, there's a lot more demand for the sparkling wine, or even now the alcoholic ginger beers and things. So I think that catering for different tastes is always going to be tricky. And of course, keeping it cold, that's the number one priority. I did in Goa, just these huge pits filled with ice, and the beer was just inside the pits. So it was an ingenious way. Hashes will find a way of working it out.
How has drinking, and when did it change there in Tasmania for accounting for the different drinkers? And how, when we started, I assume 78, there might have been like it was in a lot of places, drinking and driving was a different issue.
Yes, certainly when I started, even though you'd be pulled over for drink driving, there wasn't any random breath tests. So invariably, either from rugby training or from hash, you'd be going home and you'd be driving very steadily with your eyes fixed on the road, but you'd probably be doing well below the speed limit just to not draw attention to what you were doing. So the random breath testing and the reduction of the 2.05 for Tasmania basically meant that you could have one or two, and that was it. But we were drinking hash brew in those early days, so that was beer mixed with ginger beer. So it did increase the amount you could drink because it was diluted.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your view of your experience and enjoyment of inner hashes then. As somebody who's a control freak and organizer, but been hashing for so long, your expectation, you understand what goes into events, so you're pretty forgiving, no doubt, when things go a certain way. How do you go when you go to interhash? Are you trail driven, people driven? Is that changed over time? What do you try to do, and are you on vacation before and after?
We've never travelled out of the country without it being a hash related event, because it's just the best way of doing it. Yeah, I might not choose Central Java as a destination, but to go there with Interhash was just great experience. Chiang Mai or even Goa, they're all just full of memories. I love the trail, running through the villages, having the locals come out, and I was running in Java, and a family called me over, and they all wanted to shake hands. They invited me in. You don't get that experiences on a Kontiki tour or a senior tour.
Yeah, think about that. Sometimes we get the big fish, small pond experience, especially with two things. One, someone your size and wearing a red dress. How much of a fan of red dresses were you? Was Hobart hash the first time you had seen one?
Yes. Look, I used to love the red dress occasions, and we have an annual red dress charity run in Hobart. But I'm becoming a grumpy old man, and I don't now like the red dress runs because people don't wear red dresses. They wear red T-shirts. Okay, they're paying their fee, but it takes the spectacle out of what they're trying to do, and it just annoys me. That's being a grumpy old man.
Yeah, that's great. What else has changed in terms of how the traditions were. Maybe you readapted Hobart over the years to Burnie, but you adapted to a big change in, at least at some level, hashing traditions. But the role of songs when you go to other hashes and inner hashes, roles of singing and that kind of stuff.
I knew a lot of songs, although I knew them as rugby songs. We used to sing them at hash because we'd gather around a fire and we'd be singing the rugby songs. There was only ever one song sung in the circle when I came down to Hobart. As much as I tried to convince people that there's more than one song, there wasn't a lot of traction because it was me saying it. It took somebody from Kalgoorlie hash who was at a prelude in 2011, and he said, "You blokes only know one fucking song." And of course, he sang a few, and then I was able to sing the ones that I knew. And they're all looking around thinking, why don't we do this every week? Yeah, since 2011, the two clubs that I hash with down here have their repertoire, and we try and introduce new ones.
Yeah. I'm wearing the hat, and now I've collected as many of these I could for people. It said, "Oh, I have one of those. Give it to me." So it's my traditional bald head covering. That's the one thing that I pack for every hash trip at my thing. How much design were you doing then? Once you got to Hobart, how many events did you put things together? Was it annual? Tell me, what about this vest thing? Is that that's yours? Is that a traditional one?
Yeah, that's
full
the
moon.
Hobart full moon. So it's 130 runs. So it's 10 years of moons. I think I've done pretty much every T-shirt and every badge for the two clubs down here. The introduction of dye sublimation has just been fantastic. In fact, in Burnie, we had our own screen printing setup. So I was screen printing T-shirts back in those days, and screen printing badges, and it's a lot of work. It's very messy. So when dye sublimation came along, it was just great. I could just go wild.
Oh, let's talk about some other wider hash things. The hash museum that has evolved. It sounds like you need your own little cabinet with all the things that you've designed. What do you think about that?
I had the curator of the museum, his name
Neptunus.
Neptunus, yes. He was one of the RAs on the run that I set for Queenstown. He got 4 or 5 people up and told us to take our shirts off, and of course he tried to escape out the door with them. I like seeing them on bodies. I like seeing the ones that sort of keep coming out. I like the new ones because people say that's great. There's a lot of interest in them. I only had the one great failure. The shirt I did for 2008 for the Tasmanian contingent wasn't a particularly attractive shirt, according to the women. They felt that they couldn't get a root wearing that shirt. So it's at the bottom of my list.
What about the aging of the hash? We talked about getting new people in is going to make a difference. You're just riding the bottom of the wave of average age. We had that thing where inner hash age average would just go up every 2 years, the average attending age. Mm-hmm. But you did have breaks from hashing, but more of your life has been hashing than not at this point.
Even when the breaks were happening, I was still a hasher at heart. I'd never stopped thinking of that hash wasn't still there. It was just wasn't a weekly commitment. It's difficult because I don't know what, it can just take one person. And we've had this with the Hobart Mixed Club. Recently, one person brought along another person who brought along their son, who brought along other people. And now we've had quite an influx of younger hashers, even down to 18-year-olds and the like. So that gives me great hope.
If you were dropped into the hash again to 1978, you'd recognize the hash. It'd be the same. And someone from then dropped in today, Hobart, sounds like they would recognize the hash. More songs.
Yeah, I think we're a lot more sedate, though. I think in those 70s and 80s. We did things which were quite adventurous. The Burnie hasher by the name of Slack Mac, and he would come up with the wildest and wackiest ideas, and whether it's strapping some inner tube together and floating down a river as part of the hash trail, those sorts of things. You just don't do that. You don't see a lot of that these days.
And how is your health and trail participation now? How active are you?
Still hashing twice a week, pretty much, Mondays and Thursdays, and then the full moon. Look, I move okay for somebody of my particular body structure. And look, I think hash is good. It was a 6K walk on Monday night. I finished without any particular ill effects. And of course, Hobart's terribly flat, of course. So there weren't any hills.
It's interesting to talk about. My impression is there's pockets where the hash seems to be going strong and have made some injections. And maybe it's just random circumstance. There's certainly places where hashes have died. There's places where hashing seems like it's booming. There's some places in Africa. There's some places in Asia. And Tasmania seems like one of those places. There's some aging Australian city hashes. But it seems like something that first 90 years, of course, didn't start until the 70s, but it's coming up on 50 years, and it looks like a future of 50 years is possible. It seems like the rate of change of everything is faster now, but sounds strong.
Yeah, we went to Melbourne Men's 2,500th, which is way out of the stick somewhere. And we got there thinking it'd be a big event, and it was quite boutique. In talking to the members, there were only 12 of them, and they'd all done over 1,000 runs each. There was no one who'd done less than 1,000 runs.
Jeez.
And I'm thinking, geez, that's not good for the health of that particular chapter. And those are the chapters who just, the last one turns out the lights and they fade away.
You just had visitors, maybe. You had Crouch Thumper came and stayed with you, right?
Yes, she did. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's a quite well-known traveler that a lot of people stayed with her. She stayed at my house here in Toronto. How much of that happens? How many foreigners come through Hobart these days that are hashing?
We get a reasonable trickle through. It's not always the easiest to find where a particular hash is running from. Facebook still seems to be the place to go, but some of the groups are private. We went to Malacca a few years ago and tried to get onto the local hash there, and we couldn't do it. It just wasn't. There wasn't anybody answering the Facebook things. Now, in the old days, with the hand printed or with the printed booklets, now it was no less difficult then. Of course, it was much more difficult then.
Who takes care of that for Hobart? What's your guys' approach to public information? Or
it's still pretty much Facebook and email. The regular people are on the email list. It's a bit different to the early days of Burnie, where there was a printed trash available in one spot, and that's, if you missed picking up the trash from the previous week, you had to go and pick it up from a.
Yeah, now thinking back, I started in Kuwait in the early 80s, and there was a little expat grocery store, and that's where the directions to the hash. That's the only place in the country where the directions to the hash were. That's interesting. What about those? Did you ever do any of the hash trash writing?
I've written hundreds of run reports, and the early days it was typewriter and the glue and the Playboy magazines with the sticky tape, and that's what you did every week. And you actually wrote the run report if you were the ONSEC as well. So it was a big year if you were ONSEC.
Yeah, that with your T-shirts, you've had all kind of chemical interactions at the hashes.
Yeah, it keeps me off the streets.
We all have limited time, and interhash, the destinations aren't picked by you. Are there any places that you'd like to go when you have freedom to travel and pick, or that you would pick for hashing that you haven't been?
We're in the early stages of planning a trip to the UK, probably next year. We both retire towards the end of this year. We've got a son who's in Wales, so it would be our first non-hash specific trip away. But I would see us going over and trying to catch up with some of the hashes. We've hashed in Penang, and we've got a local contact, Choo Choo. He drove 50 kilometres to come and pick us up to take us to the hash.
Nice.
And we tried to do the same here. I went and picked Slumper up from the airport and brought her back home and let her sleep off her hangovers from New Zealand and took her to hash.
What do you think? You're a big personality. You like to be in charge. I'm not sure how much you enjoy speaking. Getting some of these for example, the Melbourne guys, you got all these people with 1,000 runs, so they've got good stories, but it's just hard sometimes to get people connected. Me and Cross Jumper has done a bunch of interviews. I could use some Southern Hemisphere, other time zone correspondence. Any ideas?
Look, it's always difficult just to think of somebody. It's go into things trying to eyeball talent.
Unless you're a rugby recruiter, yeah.
Yeah. There are lots of stories, and they may not be all with one person. They might be with many people. That's why weekends away, we've got a weekend coming up for the Chardonnay Hobart group, which is a kilt weekend called a Highland Fling. And they generate their own stories. Standing around a fire, and that's when the reminiscing starts. And so it's difficult to catch in one person who's got sort of stuff that's going to be interesting to many. But look, I'll be a talent spotter. I'll keep an ear out.
The idea of these interviews was not to get some hash stories, some history that comes up, but also to just have people meet hashers in a way that they don't when you're in a big crowd yelling and standing around a fire. So you get a chance to, with some considered talking. There are a lot of stories that there's a lot of people. I can't say that. I can't tell you this story. Yeah, it's just good. And hopefully when we publish this, it'll encourage another bunch of people to say, he forgot to say this and that. And then this will help kick things out.
Yeah, we've barely touched the surface, really. If you've been hashing for 40 years or whatever it is, there are things that happen, and even just things that sort of skip your mind every now and then. But I think with the podcasts, you had people that I'd had associations with over the years. Whether it was the Penguin, we had Digit stay in. He did the Northwest Coast after 2000.
Right.
Higgins. So all these people who I've come across over the years, and it was good to hear their stories.
Yeah, that's interesting. And is there anybody that you would like to mention, people that have passed on that were part of hashing? With you getting in at age 18, certainly there's some people that were now aged out or just came to the end of their life. Or some people you think about from the old days and miss and still get mentioned around the fire.
Luckily, a lot of the people who I've had associations with over the years are still with us. Except I know Portholes, he's probably the exception. I'll give you one story of his. We had a 10-kilometre road race in Burnie, an annual race where the hash took part as well. And there was a woman on a microphone outside a store selling lingerie, and he took over the microphone and just without skipping a beat started to spruik the wares inside, and just had everybody in fits of laughter. So, those are the things they're the memories you have.
Yeah. Where are you going next? Is your trip to UK the next big hashing trip outside of the Tasmania?
No, we've got Fremantle next year for Aussie Nash Hash, and then it'll be UK, and also we're registered for Java as well. So looking forward to getting back there.
Yeah, we'll see you there. Yeah, that I imagine that'll be a pretty big event. The hash has survived, and we're pretty close to having interhash last 50 years. but there are fewer bidders. With the world changing, it's harder to pull off. It's riskier financially. Everything's riskier now, it seems, putting on big events.
Yeah, as we learned with Queenstown, the first world countries are just so difficult to get through. Even like we had a lot of government assistance, not just money. We had actually people, we had government liaisons who were working with us to get the job done. But even then, a lot of things have changed. The regulations that have changed might not be so easy if we did it at Nash again. It is going to get difficult, like the Olympics. You don't get countries bidding for those as frequently now. It's a bit of a poison chalice to many. And it could be that it's smaller events, but I'd like to think that Interhash will still go on, at least until I stop.
I think we do. There is talk of a bid from Puerto Rico, talking about bidding in a couple years, and KL has their anniversary coming up, so it doesn't look like it's dropped off. But let's just have a couple of your comments. Queenstown was quite a different event with it. The history has been told among everybody who was there. I actually had a medical thing and I couldn't fly, so we had to skip the first Interhash I missed in 30 years. How was the event for you?
I thought it was a bit difficult because I was also a hare for one of the trails, so I was engaged with that. But I think they did a wonderful job considering they had a much reduced timeline and they had much more to deal with that wouldn't have been foreseen when the bid was put in. Even some of the outdoor drinking regulations weren't in effect when the bid was put in, and you've got to get around those things. And I think they did a tremendous job getting it as far as they did. And look, people enjoyed themselves, and particularly the first timers, because they've got nothing to compare it against. There wasn't much of a bad word said about the event overall.
There were quite a high number of Americans, proportion-wise, that made that trip. Long way, but I don't know why that was. But looking at the who's coming list, it looked like, there was a lot of Americans there. So it may be first-time Interhashers too, which hopefully will, roll over into the next events.
There was an increase in Fiji because I think with the New Zealand one, it was seen as it's a safe country to go to.
Right.
And also a desirable destination.
Yeah, the Hobart films haven't hurt making people want to go.
Queenstown is a spectacular city. It's just, it's breathtaking, really.
Do you have any future events? When's your next design challenge?
It'll be next year's Nash Hash. So the Tasmanian contingent always has a shirt, because we always get 20 or 30 people going to these events. So we have the one shirt that allows us all to wear similar clothing. We can find each other in a crowd. Club shirts. So I've probably got to do another club shirt at some stage, one of the clubs.
How do you make a design? What happens in your brain?
I look for the point of humour. I've got and with the Interhash ones, there's got the Tasmanian Devil as the central theme to all the shirts. I look for introducing local patterns or local landscapes. I just play. I keep playing until I get it to the point where I'm happy with it, which is never. But then the deadline comes, so I just put it out.
I do have one more thing I want to ask you about, and that's hash names. The American hash naming, we now talk about, it's a whole different way of approaching it. How'd you get your hash name?
We didn't have hash names when I started. It was the typical Australian thing of adding either a Y or an O to the end of your family name. But if you got mentioned in the trash, they would add something. It wasn't the first name I was given, but later on they said I came out charging out of the bush like an enraged grizzly bear. So that's the one that stuck.
Yeah. And what about the naming? Have you been involved in giving out names, and how's that happen?
Again, the control freak comes out. I so dislike when what you refer to as an RA, we call them hash slips down here. when they open it up to the circle for a name, it just doesn't work because they end up saying, "Oh, we can't figure out a name. We'll come back next week and do it again." And if somebody's ready to get their name, they don't want to hear, "We'll come back next week." I try to word them up and give them what I think is an option, or I ask other people and say, "What do you think?" And it doesn't always work, but try and make it humorous.
What do you think about the different places? I'm going to just use the American one as one example. It's not exclusive to them, but some of the hash naming, certainly outside of Australia, New Zealand, the names are not simple 1-2 syllables. They're 20, 30 letters long and as vulgar as can be.
Yeah, not a great fan. I think living in Australia or Tasmania, we're quite a free country. We don't feel like we're buttoned down overly. And I think if you're in a buttoned down society, then the opposite of that is to be quite outgoing. I think one of the hashes might have that sort of feeling about it and try and move away from conservative and make it as...
Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's true. It might be a reaction to we want our culture to be as sticking out in somebody's eye as possible. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Some of them are great. I mean, some are hugely amusing. And in fact, it got the Queenstown Committee into trouble because the Who's Coming list was publicly available, and the local press got wind of some of these people coming down, and
That's right. I forgot about that. Several months before, an actual front page newspaper article was talking about, look what they're doing to our city with these barbarians at the gate.
Yeah, we have much more sedate naming rituals here, but we try and make them funny.
I think it's been a good chat. I appreciate you staying up late.
Nothing particular. For me, hashing is about the trail first and second. It's about the community third, probably. The drinking fourth. But if I'm thirsty, I'll move it up to the top.
All right. I'll see you in the Java Interhash. We're going to do a bunch of European things, Interscandy and Eurohash the next year. We're the same as you. All of our trips are hashing trips anytime we go. No, I wanted to ask you just about the write-ups, the change in the write-ups. When we were doing paper write-ups, then it changed the way the run reports were done. Because it was going to be a piece of paper, you knew you'd hand it to people, you'd almost sometimes see their reaction. What's happened to that now?
In fact, I was saying just the same thing to one of our current on-secs in the car on Monday. I miss those days. Like I did 40 run reports for the Mixed Club last year, even if I wasn't there. And it was my literary passion to make them as interesting as possible. But we now go through WordPress, so at least I can see that they're being read. So I can see numbers, even if I don't get immediate feedback. But nothing beats handing the paper around and having them all start reading it and then chuckling where you know there should be a chuckle. And it's instant gratification.
Okay, thanks for your time. Hopefully people hear you talk and they'll say, I can be funnier than him. Because you have a sense of humor, hashing is integrated into your life, but it's late at night. You're not trying to wake up the house and with crazy things. But it's been really nice talking to you, Grizzly. We talked about the relationships in the community are important and the places that you wouldn't pick to go on vacation, you end up, but you have doors opened by the hash event, safety and opportunity. It's pretty cool. How did you get involved with Queenstown Interhash?
I offered my services to the original chairman, Louvain, and I'd done the logo for the event. And then towards the end, they said, can you change the logo? And that led into other things. And so the last month or so, Higgins was on the email almost every day or one of the other committee and saying, just do this, do that. And that was great. I mean, it didn't take me great amount of time to do some of the hardest thing is working to your client's brief, because I might think that looks naff, but they think, oh yes, that's exactly what we want. And
That's a very small club. So you designed and then redesigned the logo for Interhash 2024.
yeah, I designed it, and then it was just a color change originally. So that was the first thing it was, but then it was modified for the red dress run, for the hats for there, and for their banners, and the little sort of maps and things that Higgins put out, and the directory thing, that was stuff I did as well. So I was happy to help out.
Yeah, that's great. That's like a large imprint. It's not stuff you bring up, but now everybody can say thank you or tell you what a job you did.
Yeah. I don't like accolades, so I don't actually do it for the recognition. I just do it because I like to do it. But yeah, it's nice when Fee Fi Fo Fum came up to me afterwards and thanked me. That's as much as I needed.
Yeah, I know though, and the fact is, you thank other people and you appreciate their things, so you're just gonna have to live through it when people thank you now.
Yeah, I know.
On.
Now, something a little bit different. Instead of the Hash Anthem, we're going to have Grizzly sing a song for the end of the podcast.
Hold on.
If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. A grizzly bear is farting there because he ate all the pies. His pants are brown, the smell makes him frown. He wears a hat, he has some trout. Today's the day the grizzly has to down. A very specific song.